Welcome, everyone. We're going to give everyone a few seconds to join from the waiting room. My name is Sabrina Paganoni, and today I'm really excited to have Dr. Megan Miller here from I AM ALS joining us as a guest panelist. And as always, I'm here with Catherine Small and Alison Bullitt, our patient navigators. This is the weekly update for the platform trial. And as you know, the platform trial has really brought so many in the ALS community together with many academic partners, industry partners, and patient groups and foundations all coming together to support the trial. And I'm so excited that Dr. Miller from I AM ALS is here today. They've really been a fantastic partner in this adventure. So Dr. Miller, I'll turn it over to you for some updates about I AM ALS.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks so much, Sabrina, for having me on, and Catherine and Molly. Thank you for organizing. I'm really glad to be here. Is someone working the slides?
Yes, we can go to the next slide.
Yeah. Okay, maybe the one after that. That's me. All right, there we go. So as Sabrina said, I'm Megan Miller. I'm the Director of Science and Policy from I AM ALS, which is a patient-centered organization of advocates and organizers that work collaboratively to improve the lives of people living with ALS and also to advance access to treatments and cures. Next slide, please. I would categorize the things that we work on most heavily into, I think, 4 different categories. First and foremost, we have built and support a pretty massive grassroots movement to end ALS and to advocate for ALS. We have over 200,000 advocates in our network, and these are people that engage in a range of different ways, from meeting weekly on community groups to using our Every Action webpage to contact their members of Congress about policy issues, and a range of things in between there. We also, in collaboration with that community, drive patient-centered policy for ALS and practice. We engage with our Congress members and also federal agencies to ensure that they are enacting policies that are friendly to the ALS patient community. We also run a really amazing community support and navigation program, which helps hundreds of people every year who are living with ALS, or the families of people living with ALS, connects them with resources, and helps them navigate, the diagnosis and all that comes with that. Next slide, please. And then the 4th category is our research program. So I guess the reason that I'm the Director of Science and Policy is because our research goals and our policy goals intersect quite a lot. So one of our biggest goals in the sort of research/policy space is to increase federal funding for ALS research. I AM ALS as an organization has only been around for about 3 years, and in that short amount of time, we have successfully advocated for an increase in federal ALS research funding of $83 million. We are currently also working really hard on getting the Act for ALS passed, which would include another $100 million annually in funding for ALS research and also expanded access programs, particularly expanded access research programs, and also research on ALS and other rare neurodegenerative diseases. In addition to that, we advocated really hard to ensure that ALS was specifically called out in the President's ARPA-H initiative, which some of you may have heard of. We are hoping that will pass Congress either late this year or early next year and go into effect, which would provide additional federal support for ALS research funding. The other component of the research program is to engage the entire research system. This is a relatively new focus of the program, which we are hoping to expand on greatly in 2022. The idea behind this is that we, as an entire ecosystem that cares about ALS research, we can collaborate together, remove the silos, and just all be a little bit more efficient and effective at advancing research in ALS. And of course, this would also include, as we are a patient-centric community, this would include meaningful and authentic input from the advocate community, including people living with ALS and their caregivers. Again, that is something that we are actively working toward building. And so if there are people on this call or on the webinar who have questions or who want to give input to what that program looks like, we welcome your input, and we hope to work together to shape the future of ALS research. And then lastly, of course, we do fund some targeted research projects. So we make strategic research investments. We are not a federal funder. We cannot provide tens of millions of dollars in research funding. But we do think that as a small organization, we have a unique kind of view of the research system and like to try to make these, what I say, strategic investments and things where we feel like we can really move the needle and improve the lives of people living with ALS. And so that's what brings me here today. Next slide, please. So last year, I have here December, but I actually think it was October 2020, we funded a project. Dr. Sabrina Paganoni is the PI, and this is to provide expanded access to one of the HEALEY Platform Trial drugs, regimen. So in the proposal, the project, and I'm sure Sabrina will talk a little bit more about this in a moment, so I don't want to steal her thunder, but the proposal indicated an intention to expand access to 35 people living with ALS who would not otherwise have access to the drug through a clinical trial. Importantly, they're also conducting research on safety and disease outcomes, and also collecting biomarker data from the participants. In addition, they are producing training and advocacy materials with the intention of being able to share their learnings and experience with the broader research community, drug sponsors, clinical trial sites, et cetera. And so I noted here also that I think the value of this to I AM ALS and to the ALS advocate community is probably clear, but to put a finer point on it, I think the two big things are that this we were super impressed and happy with this project because it is I think perfect example of how scientists and clinicians can think creatively about how we can both serve people living with ALS while also expanding ALS research and knowledge. This is what we call truly patient-centric design. And then lastly, we support this project because we think that it, in combination with like the lessons learned of the EAP trial design, the parallel tracking, and then the training and advocacy materials that will come out of it, that this can essentially serve as a new model and gold standard for the field. And we're really excited to see what the future holds. So in fact, we were so excited about it. On the next slide, I linked to this amazing promotional video that our very creative communications team put together. I can take zero credit for it since I wasn't even on board then, but I think for the sake of time, I'm not going to play it, but I know that Catherine put the URL down there, and I encourage you to watch it on your own time. It's only about 2.5 minutes long, and I think it really does a nice job of explaining what the project is and the value of supporting this type of work. So with that, I guess I will pass it back off to Sabrina.
Thank you.
Oh, this is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for the partnership and all the amazing work that I AM ALS does. I really appreciate that. So if you can go to the next slide, again, I just wanted to just say a few words about this EAP Companion Program. I AM ALS helped us fund the companion program to the platform trial. As discussed in previous webinars, there are inclusion and exclusion criteria to enter the platform trial, but we understand that some people may not be able to enroll in the platform trial because of those criteria. So if people are not eligible for the platform trial itself, we really wanted to create a path for people to enter an expanded access while we do the research, the formal research in the platform trial. Now, right now, at the beginning of this EAP Companion, the program is still small, so unfortunately, we are unable to offer EAP to everyone who might be interested. But really, the partnership with I AM ALS really catalyzed, the beginning of the program, and now we are working on expanding it. So in addition to the program for one drug tested in the platform trial, we have since launched other programs. And if you can go to the next slide, again, the idea here is to provide access for people with ALS who don't qualify for the platform trial, but also to create a model, as Megan alluded to really make sure that we develop best practices around EAPs so that we can continue to facilitate the start of many new programs. So I think this is really the beginning of something that, we're just thinking about this, I think in 1 or 2 years, where I hope that EAPs will really be the model and the standard. I think was really the program where we got started to offer EAPs on a multi-site level. So there's a few sites involved with this. Please talk to your physician if you're interested in participating or considering it. And now, going back to the formal trial, normally, this week we always provide updates about the platform trial itself, where we are testing the drugs. But today, so far, we spoke about the EAP because of the great collaboration with I AM ALS. But if we can go to the next slide, I just want to go back to our usual updates. As of today, we in the formal trial, in the platform trial itself, we are really continue to make amazing progress in terms of enrollment. And as you know, for each regimen, we're testing 4 regimens. For each regimen, we're targeting approximately 160 individuals per regimen. So as you can see on the slide, looking at the numbers for regimens A, B, C, and D, we are essentially a target for B and C. We are getting real close to the target in terms of regimen A, and regimen D is really getting there too. We're still screening people for these regimens, so we cannot really call it close yet, because we need to make sure that the people who are being considered right now can enter regimen D. And once enrollment is a target for all regimens, we will definitely let you know. We're not ready to make the announcement because, again, that has not happened yet. That means that at this time, most sites will be pausing the enrollment until they can get started with the next regimen, regimen E. Again, most sites are still screening a few people at this time, but then there's going to be a time when we conclude enrollment in A, B, C, and D, and then we have to wait for E to get up and running. And unfortunately, we are making great progress on that as well. Lots of moving pieces. We monitor these on a daily basis. Actually, I should say multiple times a day. We really follow each participant to make sure that we can, number one, complete enrollment in all the regimens that we're testing right now. And also we are monitoring closely participants one by one to make sure that we know exactly when we formally close enrollment and then transition to enrollment in regimen E over the next few weeks. So that's the status of enrollment. If you can go to the next slide. Just before we take your questions, as always, we have Catherine and Alison on the line today. That's their contact information. They also developed fantastic QR codes. I had to say that they taught me a lot about technology, because you can actually scan them from the webinar, and so you can go directly to the link to check your eligibility criteria to see if you might be eligible for the trial. You can find the list of enrolling sites. We have over 50 sites that are enrolling, and we're adding more. And as we add them, they will be posted on the link, again, accessible via the QR code. If if you can go to the next slide, I also want to share a few more QR codes, and thank you, Catherine, for producing them. And basically, these are links to other groups and organizations where you can find information about clinical trial opportunities. In addition to the platform trial, there's other trials that are enrolling. And so I would recommend that you check clinicaltrials.gov, the CDC National Registry, the NILS website for more information. And of course, last but not least, the ALS signal from I AM ALS, which is such a fantastic tool developed by I AM ALS to really see in a very user-friendly format the list of available clinical trial opportunities. So again, lots of research going on and lots of ways to connect. The next slide is my last slide before we take questions. And I do want to share that we will have the biostatistics webinar next week, which we are so excited about. Many of you have asked very sophisticated biostatistical questions over the course of the last few months. And I'm so glad that we will have Dr. Chibnik, who teaches at Harvard School of Public Health. She's a fantastic biostatistician, also working on the platform trial. And she'll start what I think will be the first of a series of webinars on biostatistics. So come prepare with questions, and I'm sure Dr. Chibnik can take them. We have a couple of holidays coming up, Veterans Day and Thanksgiving. So the webinar will be canceled on those days. If not, we continue to meet on a weekly basis, and you can use the QR code, I believe, to go directly to the registration links. So again, lots of opportunities to connect. So I think we can stop sharing the slides now, and thank you, Dr. Cudkowicz, for joining as well. And so I'll ask you a few questions. What's the timeline for Regimen E?
Oh, really good question. We're hoping that enrollment will start in December for Regiment E. So we're now getting all the sites up and activated, and we're also getting the drug, labeled and shipped out. So December is the target.
Perfect. And there's also a question about future regimens, F, etc. Are we planning future regimens?
We are. I don't have any dates for F or G, but I think it will be later in 2022. We are in discussions actually with lots of different companies, and they all have slightly different timelines. But my guess is later in 2022.
Yeah. So there's a question about sites. So how many sites are open? When do you expect to have all new sites open? And there are also some specific questions about sites, some specific sites that people are interested in, such as the Cleveland Clinic. I don't know if you can help us with those.
Oh, sure. And first of all, I just also want to say that I tried the little barcodes while you guys were talking, and it works. It's fantastic. So thank you for that. So so we have 52 sites from the original 54. So 2 of the original 54 for various different reasons couldn't get activated. One of them was really personnel. They didn't have the personnel, and the other one was they didn't have a research pharmacist, which is obviously something that's really critical. So then we are adding 22 more of those. I believe 2 are now active, and I hope by the end of the year, we'll have all of them, but it could bleed a little bit into January.
Great. Can you help us explain the timelines, sort of regimen A through C, when they're fully enrolled, what happens then? Then will patients go to D before regimen E is online?
Yeah, so the way the platform trial works is basically when people come in at the master protocol consent part, they can be randomized to any regimen that's open at that time. So if, for example, A through C are full, meaning that we have everybody enrolled that we think is needed to get to 160 minimum, then those regimens are closed, and then D would be the only one open. So then the next several people will go into D until D is full or until E is started. And I do think that there is going to be a little bit of a time break between when D is fully enrolled and when E starts, which isn't perfect. Obviously, we would have preferred not to have any time where we didn't have an option in the platform trial. But I think because of really kind of drug supply things, we're going to have a little period where D will be closed to new participants and E won't be open yet, but hopefully it won't be very long.
There's a question about how to get the link to see if someone is eligible. So perhaps Catherine, could you add that to the chat so that people can see the link to the eligibility criteria? Question about open label extension. Can you walk us through the open label extension? What happens after somebody finishes the placebo control period of the trial?
Yeah, so everybody has an option to go into the open label extension, and for the drug that is matched to the regimen they were part of. So if in regimen A, it would be an open label for that drug. And in open label, there's no placebo. So there, you're getting the active drug, and people can continue on that until we have the results of the trial, if they want. And if the results are positive, and most, if not all the companies have said that they would continue to provide it to people. If it doesn't work, then obviously people wouldn't want to keep on it. It's really important for two reasons. One, I think it's the right thing to do, and we've heard that from individuals with ALS and community groups, and we believe it ourselves. But the second is it also actually provides really important longer term data on the drug. And we saw that from the Centaur AMX035 study, that the open label extension provided really critical information that probably will help get it approved in the US and Canada at least.
Great. There's a great question about how to choose a trial. So if somebody is eligible for more than one trial, for example, HEALEY trial, the Budilas trial, AMX35, how do you choose which one to join for maximum benefit?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a good problem to have. We didn't have this problem a couple of years ago when maybe there was one trial at a center, and now there's many. And I think it's a discussion with your team and your doctor there and the team there about the science. So I would start with, it's the science. Does that make sense for you? And then it's also about eligibility. Not every trial has the same eligibility criteria. So kind of narrowing it down to which trials you are eligible for, and then really looking at how long it is, what's the ratio of drug to placebo, is there open label, everything that the Signal website is geared up to help you compare them. But I think the number one thing probably is the science, and if it makes sense for you at where you are in the illness, and that I think you really should have a team that helps go through that with you and help you with those decisions.
Great. So we are receiving lots of questions. So let's take a few about the platform trial. And then we can move on to maybe EAP's expanded access, since we had Megan today and we spoke about that. But the platform trial, if somebody was initially randomized to placebo in the placebo control trial, will they receive the active drug in the open label extension?
Yes, everybody in open label gets active drug.
Right. And so when the regimen E fills, will enrollment be paused?
When we're done with regimen E, if we don't have another regimen enrolling, yes, we would pause. But I do hope we'll have other regimens up by then.
Great. Is there ever going to be a trial for a patient with symptom onset greater than 3 years?
Yes, I hope so. I mean, there are already, like I was just saying in the past, like the cytokinetics first studies had no cutoff for time from onset. I think the earlier phase trials, like the phase 1 or phase 2As, have more flexibility around that. So yes, I do think there will be trials for that. And then there's the EAPs for that group of people as well.
Yeah, we have a few questions about the EAP, so I wanted to take them. And before I do that, a quick question. Somebody asked about regimen C drug, if it's okay to take the drug first thing in the morning with riluzole. And yes, I can tell you that's correct, but please always consult with your site team. I'm sure you're working with site investigator and coordinator, so please consult with them in terms of how to take the drug. A few questions about EAP. Like a difficult question, is it better to be enrolled in an EAP versus a clinical trial? Because in a clinical trial there is a placebo component. So maybe Dr. Cudkowicz, can you explain the difference between the two? Sure.
I think that it's one can't do both. If you're eligible for the trial, the trial is the option. EAP is really for people who are not eligible for trials, and that's a really important criteria by the FDA and all the funding groups, that the EAP cannot really interfere with the ability to tell if the drug works or not. So it's not really which one's better, it's which one you're eligible for at the time.
All right. There's a few questions about the cost of EAPs. So the first question is, how much does it cost to fund an EAP slot, and can people contribute? So for example, I know we are fundraising for an EAP. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, and thank you. It's because of a lot of people supporting the EAP that we've been able to launch not just the Biohaven one, but the clean one, and now the Perennial one and other ones. It costs, based on our doing this now for about 2 years at Mass General, it's about $10,000 a person for a year of compassionate use of an oral drug. And those costs are largely the kind of nursing doctor coordinator staff, because we can charge like labs to the insurance, and the companies provide the drug for free. Now, could that cost go down as people get more of these and more kind of efficient? I think so, but that's about the cost right now.
Yeah, and that's actually a sort of related question about EAPs for tofersen, the Biogen drug for SOD1 ALS. So the question is that, you know, some clinics are not doing that. Can you explain, you know, perhaps why some clinics may not be able to do it, or, you know, where can people go if they have SOD1?
Yeah, so I think the company is providing the drug, but no resources. So that does mean that the centers need to have resources to do it. And so, for example, at Mass General, we actually have an SOD1 fund from patients who've donated to us for SOD1 research, and that's what we're going to use so that we can offer that EAP to our to the people that we care for. And hopefully, many centers will do it, but not all are going to be able to do it, because that one is given into the spinal fluid, so you need to have, you know, a doctor or nurse practitioner to do that, and some more safety things. So I think that one will probably cost more than $10,000 a year, but it's so important. I mean, but unfortunately, it's kind of on the back of philanthropy to be able to do it.
Yeah, and a general question about EAP is, how can someone apply for an EAP?
So any doctor can write to a company in the FDA for an EAP for their patient. So the first person to talk to is your local doctor, if they can do it. If they can't for whatever reason, then I think going to these centers that are saying that they're going to provide EAP, but often again they tend to do it for their own patients, because that's one of the criteria for being in EAP, that you have your care there. So I think that the solution to this is actually opening more and more centers that do it. And I do think that there's a groundswell of change of opinion on this by neurologists. We have, I think, a list of at least 18 sites that want to join the EAP. And we've gotten many sites calling us, asking us about the cost, how to do it, that they're going to do fundraisers. So I hope that we'll get to the point that every center offers this.
Yeah, absolutely. As we said earlier, also because of the grant from I AM ALS, we are developing these educational materials in education in collaboration with Duke University, and so these will be disseminated. So a question about specifically if the tofersen EAP is available at Mass General. So
we are offering it to our patients. Yes.
Yeah. So going back to the platform trial, we have a couple questions in the last couple of minutes about the trial itself. So the formal trial, the idea of the trial was to evaluate drugs rapidly and potentially dropping a drug that doesn't show promise. Are these drugs being evaluated during the trial? So are there interim analyses for lack of efficacy, or do we need to wait until the end?
Yes, we have interim analyses every 12 weeks or so, and therefore what we call futility, meaning that if the drug doesn't have a chance to work, or if it's going the wrong direction, or in general, if it's not going to work, it could be stopped early. And I've said this publicly before. I think every trial in ALS should have interim analyses for futility.
Question about sort of when we start a new regimen, what is the hardest and most consuming part? Are there any ways to speed up new regimens?
Yes, it's funny. I was just writing to my team about that. It is slightly painful, I have to say. So I think it's there's all these federal regulations of what sites have to do to be a part of a trial, like conflict of interest forms and getting their consent forms to us. So there's a lot of paperwork. That's the barrier, and we can't activate a site until they get that all to us. But it's not like rocket science. It's not like, you know, solving the disease in the lab. It's definitely feasible. So I think, again, it's down to personnel at the site and the ability to move fast on these things. So we're trying to help our sites do that.
And when we can expect the readout of the first completed regimens?
I think, next end of spring, early summer, I think. We'll know more exactly, and we'll share it here when we have the last person enrolled in regimen A, because B and C are fully enrolled now. As soon as A is done, that will set the timeline for having the results for A, B, and C. And we'll share it at this weekly call.
Yeah. And last couple of questions. There's a question about the spots, that the slots in this EAP, the 30% EAP that I AM ALS is funding. Are those multi-year, or will these slots continue to be funded on an ongoing basis?
It's a good question, and hopefully now we have I AM ALS on here, that if that we could be able to extend it more than a year. That we're doing it kind of a year at a time. We will have results, next summer on verdiperstat, and that might guide who might be able to cover that ongoing cost.
Yeah. Great. And there's questions about specific centers, whether they are part of the EAP or not. So perhaps can you explain how we're going to include other centers in this multi-center EAP companion?
Yeah, so we have 8 so far, and we try to, every time we do an EAP, add 2 or 3 more centers, and we have a list of the centers that are interested. I think we could share maybe next week the current ones. And then we pick them based on their interests, and also that they're a good site in the platform trial, that they're enrolling well and they have high quality data, and they can do this, because we also need the EAP to be done well, because we don't want the program to be shut down if it isn't done well. So
right.
Those are some of the criteria.
Last question, can you elaborate on the cost, the $10,000 for EAP patient per year? Is that the cost to the patient, or is it the cost to cover the center? What are the donations for?
It's for the center, so it's to kind of coordinate and run it, centrally, as well as the site costs. And there isn't a cost to the person with ALS other than their time and their getting to the center, and like that kind of stuff, but no other cost.
Great. Very last question. Will we have the results of A, B, and C at the same time?
Yes, that's our plan. We're going to be very busy next spring and summer, but in a good way. I think D will be shortly afterwards.
Great. So I think we are at time, and I just wanted to thank Dr. Miller for joining us and for the great partnership with I AM ALS. Really, the work you do is impressive. And we can't wait to regroup with all of you, and especially very excited about the biostatistical webinar next week. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks for having me.